Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Ladies, gentlemen, simmer down. And seeing as I don't have everyone's name memorized. What's her name? All right, now I have the high schooler. Oh, man, what's her name? Kareem, up here. I'm just going to go ahead and Usama, come here. Yeah, Usama, go next to this. The chairs are over here. Come here, over there. Yalla. Yes, you. Remind me your name? Imran. Come here, Imran. All right. Ibrahim, can I bother you to go up here? Hold on. You go over there, Imran. Over there. Zaid is like, he's chewing his gum. How are you, Zaid? Kareem, come here, man. I told you, come. All right, where's Amir? Come here, Amir. All right, my friend. Right over there. See, they keep going next to each other. And then Jude. Jude, right? Jude, come here, Jude. Jude, take this chair. Yeah, right over there, Jude. All right. Okay, so today is the last of a series of topics on LGBT. And today the title is Your Friend is Gay. Right? You know, once upon a time, we would really see that as kind of funny, but this is the reality now, right? And so what do you do? What don't you do? The do's and don'ts. And to really get this into perspective, it's always important to understand that the Muslims have gone through similar scenarios. Now, not in terms of LGBT, but in terms of this conflict between how do we reconcile between our beliefs, our ethics, and relationships with those who don't agree with them or have chosen different persuasions. And this question, now we can go back to the life of the Prophet ﷺ, go to the Quran and see if the Quran addresses this. And the answer is yes. In fact, there is a short chapter that is all about this. It's called Surah Mumtahina, the 60th chapter. And this chapter seems to have been revealed around the year 6 of Hijrah, which means 19 years after the initial verses of the Quran came down, these verses are coming down. And the context of this surah is what's called a treatise of Hudaybiyah. Now, after several years of conflict between Quraysh, Mecca, and the Muslims in Medina, it's been about 4 or 5 years of conflict, military conflict. The Prophet ﷺ and the companions wanted to go down to Mecca for Umrah. And as they were going, all of a sudden the camel of the Prophet ﷺ stopped moving. It just sat. Every time the Prophet ﷺ tried to mobilize the camel, it wouldn't move. And so someone made a comment and said, it looks like the Prophet's mount is disobeying the Prophet. And the Prophet ﷺ said, rather, the one who stopped the elephants from attacking Mecca is the one who stopped this camel. So he told his companions to make tents, to make camp. They're going to stay there the night and then to see what happens. Well, to make the story short, basically, the Muslims enter into a peace treaty, a neutral peace treaty with Quraysh, with Mecca. And for the first time in a very long time, you feel like two opposing communities are now seeing a little bit more eye to eye. Now imagine you are of the Muslim camp in a society that really takes family seriously. Your father, your mother, your brothers, your sisters, these are the most important elements of your life. You are willing to die for them. and you're willing to defend them with every single ounce of energy that you have, with every sweat, with tears, and with every dime in your pocket. That's the society that they were living in. And so now that there's some peace between them, maybe I can go and visit my parents who aren't Muslim. Imagine this. You have Muslims with the Prophet who had parents who were non Muslims, siblings who were non Muslims, children who were non Muslims. And they felt like, yeah, let's go and let's talk to them. Let's, show our love for them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals the verse, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, la tattakhidhu aduwi wa aduwakum awliya, tulquna ilayhim bil mawaddati wa qad kafaru bima ja'akum min al-haq, yukhrijuna ar-rasula wa iyyakum an tu'minu billahi rabbikum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the Muslim community and says, O you who believe, don't bring yourself near to your enemies and the enemies of Allah. Why? This word enemy is a very harsh word, right? Hate is a strong word, as we say in English. You're my enemy, that's a strong statement. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what He's saying, and He's making a strong statement. Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calling the Meccans your enemies, the enemies of Muslims? He says, يُخْرِجُونَ الرَّسُولَ وَإِيَّاكُمْ. They drove you out of your home. You're Meccans. That's where you grew up. That's your home. That's where your parents are. That's where your family is. That's where your businesses were. That's your blood right there. They kicked you out. They drove you out. Why? Simply because you had a certain persuasion. You believe that none is worthy of worship except Allah. And you had the verses coming down, lakum dinukum waliyadin. Islam is very clear. You have your ways, we have our ways. Yeah, we disagree in terms of what's truth, but beyond that, you have your ways. You can do what you want. We're going to tolerate you, but tolerate us as well. The Muslims tolerated the Meccans, but the Meccans didn't tolerate them, to the extent that they drove them out of their own homes and robbed them of every dime that they worked for, and sent them to pretty much die in the slums of Medina, because Medina, before the coming of the Prophet ﷺ, was the slums, it was the ghettos, as we call them. That's why they're your enemies. So don't think that this peace treaty that has come about changes that reality. They have still done this to you. And then the surah continues to go on and says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ قَدْ كَانَتْ لَكُمْ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ فِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you have a good example in the life of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim, a role model, this young man at the time. What did he do? إذ قالوا لقومهم إنا براء منكم ومما تعبدون من دون الله كفرنا بكم وبدا بيننا وبينكم العداوة والبغضاء أبدا. Ibrahim alayhi salam, Allah is telling the Muslims, Ibrahim alayhi salam is a good role model for you. When he and those who were with him stood up and told their people, we will never be your friends. Why? Because of what you have done to us. The people of Ibrahim alayhi salam, they catapulted him in a fire. Why? Because he had discussions with them? Because he disagreed with them? Is that fair? You can understand if there's a heated discussion. You're debating somebody, they get frustrated and they lash out. Fine, I mean, we can understand that. But what right do you have to take me and catapult me into a fire? So Ibrahim alayhi salam, why did he make this stance? Because he understood that these people have done me wrong, done him wrong. They have done an injustice to me and my followers. And he made it clear, we are free from what you do. We don't follow that way. Your way is wrong. And so long as you treat us this way, we're going to defend ourselves, we're going to protect ourselves, and we're going to do everything in our capacity to make sure that we survive this. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again gives us this principle, this mindset. Don't forget about what they're doing. When somebody speaks out against LGBT, what happens to them? What happens? If they're in corporate America, what happens to them? Fired. If a celebrity says something, canceled. This is a type of exilement, isn't it? The Meccans exiled the Muslims. The people of Ibrahim exiled Ibrahim and his followers. Today, This lobby is exiling anybody who disagrees with them. You see how where the animosity is? And so long as they are going to do this to us, we have every right to use our legal to use legal venues to defend ourselves. And so, how do we deal with people who are of this persuasion? Well, to make this a little bit more categorized, we ask the question: is this person a Muslim, or are they not a Muslim? And from there, we get to kind of dig a little bit deeper. Let's start with non-Muslims. You're non-Muslim, you know a non-Muslim who's gay, a classmate, a coworker, a neighbor. They are openly LGBT, whatever letter they go back to. How do we deal with them? Now, somebody might come to these verses and say, yes, we got to be aggressive, we got to make sure our stance is made clear, and we got to push back against them. But hold on. The verses go on. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم. Allah does not prohibit you from being kind and friendly to those who are neutral towards you. Meaning they're not involved in this cancel culture. They're not involved in getting you fired if you disagree with them. They're just your neighbor and they're a friendly person. They understand that you come from a certain persuasion and you disagree with their lifestyle. But, I respect your beliefs. I disagree with them. And therefore, I'm neutral towards you. So if you know somebody who's gay and they are neutral towards you, they're not attacking you. They're not trying to harm you. They're not trying to get you canceled. They're not trying to get you flunked in or dropped out of school or get you fired from work. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says there's nothing wrong with being kind to such people and showing compassion in the human sense, not in terms of their lifestyle, but to develop those relationships. Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a coworker who you see and you have conversations with, and they are of the LGBT persuasion. Now, as I've said before, due to the circumstances of today, the last thing you want is for some other Muslim who knows you to see you with somebody who's clearly of that persuasion and say, "Oh, why are you sitting there chilling with that person? Are you endorsing this lifestyle?" So there is a type of harm that can come back in terms of your reputation. So keep those relationships in the environment where you see that person. If it's at work, keep it at work. If it's at school, keep it at school. Right? Don't go beyond that for now until this kind of settles down. And so if the non-Muslim LGBT person is neutral to you, be neutral to them. And there's nothing wrong with building those relationships. What if they're friendly to you? Well, let's ask the question. Were there any mushrikeen, polytheists, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, who were not simply neutral towards the Prophet, they were actually friendly and supportive of the Prophet? And the answer is yes. There was a polytheist by the name of, I think, Mut'im ibn Adi, if I'm not mistaken. Mut'im was somebody who's a polytheist, died as a polytheist. And remember, always remember this, polytheism, shirk, is a much greater sin than homosexuality, than somebody changing their gender. Right? It's a much greater sin. And so Mut'im was a mushrik, but Mut'im was constantly advocating for the Muslims when they were in Mecca. In fact, when the boycott happened, there was a period of 3 years where the Meccans were boycotting Muslims. What that means is they wouldn't do business with them. They wouldn't trade with them. They wouldn't marry with them. And that was the boycott. What caused the boycott to end was actually Mut'im, this mushrik. Why? Because he advocated for the Muslims. He went and he talked to so-and-so, and he talked to but he pretty much lobbied on behalf of the Muslims as a polytheist. Now, when Mut'im passed away, the Prophet ﷺ said some very good things about him. He said, if Mut'im were to ask me for, I forgot exactly what. If Mut'im were to ask me for something, I would have answered him. What do we understand from this? We can understand that there could be somebody who we passionately disagree with, and they are doing what we believe to be are the greatest of sins, but they are friendly to us. They are supportive of us. And because of that, we can reciprocate that, of course, to an extent, right? If people of the LGBT persuasion want to be friendly to us and advocate some of our causes, which they do, they are very upfront and vocal about the situation in Palestine. They are, right? There's nothing wrong with us reciprocating that. But what is haram is haram. Just because you're doing us a very great service, for example, speaking out for the Palestinian cause, I still believe that homosexuality is haram. It's impermissible. And therefore, although I appreciate what you do, I cannot lobby that for you. I can't. And if you say, okay, if you don't do that for us, then we're not going to talk on behalf of Palestinians, then look, what are you really defending when it comes to the Palestinian cause? Are you trying to speak out against an injustice? If that's the case, then the injustice remains there, even if you and I disagree. But if you say, no, I'll only speak out on behalf of that cause if you do it for me as well, then are you really into human rights? Or are you just finding an opportunity to benefit yourself? It's self-serving. Right? So going back to this idea that there could be somebody who we passionately disagree with who is friendly to us, and we're allowed to reciprocate that. I'll give you another example. When the Prophet ﷺ was in Medina, we know that there were Jewish tribes in Medina. There were specifically 3 different Jewish tribes. Now, when you look at the Prophet ﷺ's engagement with the Jews of Medina, you find that the way he engaged them was different. You had, for example, a Jew who approached the Prophet ﷺ and said, Assalamu alaikum. The Prophet said, Wa alaikum assalam. And he said, Ya Abul Qasim, O father of Qasim. This is a respectful way of addressing the Prophet ﷺ, by a non-Muslim at least. He said, O Abu Qasim, what is the appetizer of the people of paradise before entering paradise? And the Prophet ﷺ answered. And the Jew said, you are 100% right. Assalamu alaikum. And that's it. And so the Prophet ﷺ showed friendliness to that person. Why? Because he was showing friendliness to the Prophet ﷺ. And there's more than one case when a Jew came and respectfully spoke to the Prophet ﷺ, and how the Prophet reciprocated that friendliness. But there is a third category of non-Muslims from the LGBT persuasion. These are the people who we began with, the surah begins with. Those who are aggressive towards us. Those who want to come and say, I'm going to teach your children, and you don't have the right to teach your children. I'm going to teach your children what I believe is the truth, and if you try and stop that or opt them out, then you are abusing your children, and this type of stuff. The people who will come after others who disagree. And again, as we've said before, the problem with the LGBT lobbying, it's not with just Muslims. They're going after anybody and anything that won't fully embrace and incorporate what they believe to be true. That is an aggressive behavior that tells me this person isn't a friend. That person is a danger to me. Because if I don't submit to their agenda, if I don't submit to their whims and their desires, then they attack me. Is that a friend or is that an enemy? That's an enemy. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes and says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, la tattakhidu aduwi wa aduwakum awliya. Don't take my enemies and your enemies as people who are near to you. Allah just making the obvious clear. And by the way, this shows something about the companions, about Muslims in general, by the way. And we still have this till this day. Allah in many verses tells the companions, hey, these are your enemies, be careful. Hey, no, don't get too close to them. Why? Why does Allah keep telling them this? Because of the mercy in their hearts. It is expected of Muslims because of what we're taught, because of what the Quran and Sunnah teaches us, because of how the Prophet lived, alayhi salatu wasalam. that Muslims are naturally merciful and compassionate to other people. In fact, there was this one YouTuber who went around Europe and then went to Morocco, basically asking the question, how many genders are there? When he went to Morocco, of course, there's always a chance that there's editing, and he picked and choose, right? There's always that possibility. But when he was in Morocco and he was asking people how many genders there are, the answer was almost always the same. Look, if that's the way you want to live, it's fine. Go, you have the right to live the way you want to. We disagree with it, but you have that right. We're just asking you not to shove it down our throats. So we see across the board, Muslims have this ability to be moderate, but also Muslims sometimes become blinded by that compassion, by that mercy. And so Allah steps in and kind of reminds us, hey, you do have some enemies. When somebody like Jeffrey Marsh, I think his last name is Marsh. Have you all heard of him? YouTube him. Search him on YouTube. Jeffrey Marsh has this clown makeup on his face. And I think he's taken down the videos because a huge controversy broke out. But literally there were videos of him saying, hey, kids, if you don't feel comfortable at home, you can come live with me. On YouTube. Is that a friend? Is that somebody I'm supposed to be compassionate towards? Is that somebody to say love is love and love knows no boundaries, knows no limits? Yeah, come here, I'm going to embrace you. No, you're an enemy. You're a threat. It's clear, right? So Allah says, oh, you who believe, look at what they're doing to you. You know when one of the Muslim politicians went and danced with the transgender community a few years ago? Right? May Allah guide her. But that's wrong. I looked at the comments of that video. Honestly, do this. Test this out. I looked at the comments of that video. So you have a Muslimah dancing with transgenders. In the comments, like the highest comments, people were saying, don't believe her. Muslims hate us. Don't believe her. They don't really love us. That's their opinion of us. They know what our religion says, and that's how they're going to treat us. And as I've said before in my khutbah, the first khutbah I gave, the LGBT lobby is setting the terms of this current situation. They're the ones setting the terms. Nobody was preaching, go after them, in terms of the Muslim community, as far as I know, at least mainstream Muslims. We weren't preaching, go after them, treat them bad, beat them up in the streets. We weren't preaching that. But once the lobby started coming and showing their fangs and being aggressive towards us, then we're going to be like Ibrahim alayhi salam. Because Allah tells us we have a good role model in him. But while we be like Ibrahim alayhi salam, the verse that comes after, it says, عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَجْعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَ الَّذِينَ عَدَيْتُم مِّنْهُمْ مَوَدَّةً. I love this verse. It's so beautiful. Allah says, perhaps Allah will make closeness and love between you and the ones who were previously your enemies. In other words, we can be at odds with the community. But as Muslims, Allah is teaching us it's not personal. And perhaps in the future, those people who we are at odds with become Muslims and become close friends of ours. That's what we want for them. It's not personal. There's nothing in it for us. We want the good for all people. But when you are aggressive to us, we have every right to stand up for our rights as Muslims. And even legally, don't we have the constitutional right of freedom of religion? We do. And we will fight for that. Right? So this is how we deal with non-Muslims who are who identify with this persuasion. And so to kind of reiterate, to sum this all up, if that non-Muslim is neutral towards you, we can be neutral towards them. Nothing wrong with that. We can give them a hi, how are you? How are you, neighbors? Everything okay? You can be kind to your co-workers who are of this persuasion, or even non-Muslims in general, right? If they're friendly to you, if they benefit you, maybe they're even benefiting society. There's nothing wrong with appreciating that. Nothing wrong with us publicly saying, you know what, I appreciate so-and-so because of the good work they're doing for humanity or for whatever cause that we believe in. But if they're aggressive towards us, then we're going to be like Ibrahim alayhi salam, and we are going to say, we acknowledge your aggression, and we disavow what you do. We will not be close to you, and we will continue to defend ourselves until you put down arms. It's in your court. The ball is in your court. But now the question is, what if they're Muslim? Because we know that there are a lot of Muslims, maybe not a lot, but there are Muslims who are struggling, who maybe identify this way. But like non-Muslims, there are different categories. Same thing with Muslims. There are different categories. One category is what I call Muslims who are sincerely struggling with same-sex attraction. And what that means is they understand that this is wrong, this is haram. And they're doing their best to avoid falling into that. How do we engage such individuals? In other words, if a Muslim comes to you, a friend, whoever, and says, I'm attracted to the same gender. Or they come and say, you know what, I know that biologically I'm a male, but I actually feel like a female. I think I'm transgender. Or they say that, I like dressing up like a woman even though they're a man. I get these emails, by the way. And they understand that, I know this is haram. I don't know what to do. How do we deal with them? Do we disavow ourselves? Say, oh my God, you're such a devil, and no, get away from me? Is that what we do? What do we do? Right? We support them in their struggle. We help them in their struggle. We appreciate them because they are people who are beloved to Allah. Why? Because Allah loves when somebody does jihad, which is struggle. They know what is pleasing to Allah and what's displeasing to Allah. And they're trying their best to do what is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is somebody who Allah loves. And that is somebody who Allah says He is with. إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمَعَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Those who strive to do what pleases Allah, Allah is with those people. So when you see somebody sincerely struggling in this regard, then, man, I don't wish to be in your boots, but so long as you struggle, then that's something to look up to. That's something to appreciate. And so we Muslims as a community, we need to be sensitive to the presence of these individuals and not shun them out of our communities, out of our families, right? And this is a test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing all of humanity with today. And some people are just going to be afflicted by it. And once the Prophet ﷺ was looking into open land, and he says, do you see what I see? He said, no, Ya Rasulullah, we don't see anything. We just see kind of emptiness. He said, I see tests falling on this earth the way rain falls down. And so sometimes a test comes to you because that piece of rain or that droplet of rain happened to fall on you, on the person. And so we cannot be judgmental towards them. We shouldn't be judgmental towards them. We shouldn't be shunning of them. We shouldn't hurt their feelings, but rather be there for them, help them. They came to you, by the way. And maybe they came to you for a reason. Maybe Allah sent them to you for a reason. Because He knows you could be their support. And you are the support that they need. And be private about that situation, and don't go start, oh my God, start texting your other buddies or your other friends and start saying, you're never gonna guess what happened. Come meet me at In-N-Out and let's talk about it. Don't do that, right? This person has come to you with very sensitive information, and you need to be there for them. And we are brothers and sisters for one another. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you have enemies, you also have awliya. And He says, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. Believing men and believing women are guardians of one another. They support one another. And they support one another how? By encouraging the good and discouraging the bad. They need your help. So be compassionate towards them. That is if they are sincerely struggling. But we know that there are Muslims who are accepting of this. They are allies to the community. They believe there's nothing wrong with it. They believe that the Quran doesn't say it's haram. How do we deal with these Muslims? Now, we're going to take a different approach. Again, we never want to sever our ties or our relationships with a fellow Muslim. We never want to do that. Yes, we can distance ourselves from them. We have the freedom to do that. but we never want to disconnect. Why? Because it's counterproductive. Imagine. Imagine right now that all the devils that are wandering this earth, whether humans or from the jinn, right? Stay with me, Kareem. Whether from human or jinn, they're walking around and they're looking for their next prey. And the Prophet ﷺ says the shayateen have easier time attacking the lone sheep. If we disconnect ourselves from our fellow Muslim, we leave them as the lone sheep to become prey of the shayateen. And so we got to make sure that we never sever ties with fellow Muslims. But we also need to stand our ground. It's not right. It's wrong. Why is it wrong? Because Allah said so, not because I said so. Nobody is going to stand on the day of judgment in front of me and be held accountable by me or by any scholar or by any other Muslim. They're going to stand in front of Allah. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks them, why did you endorse this? When I have said that this is wrong, what's their answer going to be? On a day where you can't lie, you can't manipulate. The truth is the truth. There's no getting around that. So we must stand our ground, and Allah will ask us, when all of this was going on, what was your stance? Yeah, we could be questioned. No, we will be questioned about this, because this is something that is truth and falsehood. And so when a Muslim is accepting of this, we have to make it clear and known that, you know what, you're wrong. And you know what, you can't be doing this. You can't support it. Whether that's supporting it for political strategies or that's supporting it as a lifestyle. You can't do that. And if the person wants to argue with you, then you have the choice of either debating, if you know how, if you feel like you could prove your point. But if you can't, then you know what? You're wrong. I have to disconnect myself from you, or I have to create a little bit of distance between you and I. Right? So with Muslims, it is expected that Muslims believe in the Quran. And the Quran is clear in this regard. And so although the way we might interact with a non-Muslim who is accepting of this, who believes it's a acceptable lifestyle, we might say, look, if you're neutral towards us, we're neutral towards you. You're friendly towards us, we're friendly towards you. With a Muslim, it's a little bit different because you're supposed to know the truth. And I can't sit here and tolerate you accepting something that goes against what you believe to be the truth, that is the Quran. Right? And so we need to make sure that our Muslim brothers and sisters who accept this, it's clear to them that this is wrong, and they are sinful for accepting this. In fact, if they say that this is a-okay in the Quran, it could be more than just a sin. And then finally, what about Muslims who are not only accepting of this, they are rebellious in this regard? These are the ones who will come on YouTube and say, oh man, all these scholars are fakes. They're all, they're liars, and they're trying to brainwash us, and they're trying to tell us that all this is wrong when it's the truth. And no, this is a whole different ballgame now. Those rebellious Muslims, they need to be addressed by those who are learned from within the Muslim community. They need to be addressed. They need to be said, no, what you're doing is wrong. We need to debate them. But we debate them, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us in the Quran, ادعو إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن. Discuss with them in ways that are wise, in ways that are effective, and in ways that will, lead to positive results. But the fact of the matter is, we will be less tolerant to Muslims who are endorsing this than to non-Muslims who are endorsing this. Why? Because we have to protect our religion, and that means we protect the orthodoxy of our religion. And a Muslim has less of an excuse to be playing around with this than a non-Muslim. So I'll go ahead and stop here in this regard, because I'm sure there are a lot of questions. There is Slido available for you to ask anonymously. Did you share it in the chat? Okay. So if you go to the Salam Corner chat,